Welcome to our study of Numbers. Numbers is about the organization of a new generation after the disobedience of the Exodus generation. Numbers affirms Mosaic authorship more than 80 times. The New Testament cites many events from Numbers that are associated with events in Moses' life. Numbers records the historical events of Israel from 1445 to 1406 BC. The history begins 1 month after the construction of the tabernacle. The majority of Numbers focuses on the 38 period of the wilderness wanderings. The last section covers the first 5 months of the new generation that would enter the promised land. The writing of Numbers began sometime after 1444 BC and was completed by 1406 BC. Numbers records the transition from the Exodus generation to what I call the entrance generation. The Exodus generation failed to believe God and turned from following him at Kadesh Barnea. God judged them to wander in the wilderness until that Exodus generation had died and a new generation could be raised up to take possession of the promised land. These first recipients had watched their adult generation, those 20 and older, die because they had failed to obey the word of the Lord at Kadesh Barnea. These recipients have grieved over the loss of friends and family because their people had failed to trust the Lord God and enter into the promised land. The new generation has watched as Israel rebelled against her leaders and God. Now these recipients, the entrance generation, have come of age and they are responsible to the Lord God. A main argument or summary statement is that Yahweh prepares a covenant people for holy war and to inherit his covenant promises by judging a disobedient generation and raising up an obedient people. A main purpose was to encourage Israel to form an ordered national life by trusting Yahweh, his covenants, and his appointed leaders, while learning from the failures of their forefathers, so that they may possess and retain the promised land. A key verse is Numbers chapter 14, verse 30. It states, "Not one of you will enter the land that I swore with uplifted hands to make your home, except Caleb and Joshua. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I will bring them in to enjoy the land you have rejected. But you, your bodies, will fall in this desert." Some major themes in the book of Numbers are the organization and the census of the people, testings and chastisement, rebellion and murmuring against Moses, Aaron, and the Lord God, the dedication of leaders and the priesthood, the celebration of festivals, the prophet Balaam and King Balak, songs of prophecies and praise and victory because of the Lord God. And you will discover more themes as you read through Numbers. An outline of Numbers can be divided into 3 major divisions. First, the organization and consecration of Israel in preparation to enter the promised land in chapters 1 through 10. This addresses the census of the 12 tribes, the position and order of the tribes, the duties of the Levitical families, laws for keeping a healthy community, laws for restitution, for morality, the instruction for the Nazirite vow, offerings by the leaders, the sanctification of the Levites, the celebration of the Passover, and the possession and the procession and leading of God. Second, the failures of Israel with their leaders before the Lord God in chapters 10 through 21. Israel began the march to Kadesh Barnea. The Lord judged Israel for complaining about meat. The Lord judges Miriam for criticizing Moses. The reconnaissance and bad report of the spies. The Lord condemns them for unbelief. Instructions for sacrifices when they do enter the promised land. Laws for intentional and unintentional sins. The making of tassels to help them remember the law. The judgment of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Instructions to Aaron for the priesthood and sacrifices. We see the sin of Moses when he struck the rock. The refusal of the Edomites to let Israel pass through the land. And the death of Aaron and God's judgment on Israel with the fiery serpents. The third section is chapters 22 through 36. We see that Yahweh prospers Israel in spite of Balaam and the Midianites. We see that Balak hires Balaam to curse Israel, but it always turns the reverse to be a blessing. The census of the wilderness generation. Laws concerning inheritance. The Lord's command to Moses to appoint Joshua a successor. Instructions for sacrifices and festivals. Laws concerning vows. The Lord commanding Israel to judge the Midianites. Instructions to the Transjordan, or 2.5 tribes, who decided to remain on the east side of the Jordan River. A review of the journey from Egypt to Moab. Instructions for possessing the land and also dividing it according to the inheritance. Now let's put our feet into the sands of time so that we may read as it was intended from Moses to the new generation, to the new entrance generation. You are standing on the plains of Moab near the place of Mount Nebo. As you look back, you are reminded of the many years of wilderness wanderings in the Sinai desert. You have buried most of your family and friends in the rocky caves and desert sand. You are poised and ready to enter the promised land. You know from previous reports that there are many giants and powerful peoples in the land. Canaan is filled with pagan peoples, trials and temptations. You must learn from the mistakes of the past. You must follow your leaders and not complain against them or the Lord God. Moses and Aaron have died, but God has raised up Joshua and Eleazar to guide you to victory in the promised land. You will encounter false gods, false prophets, but God will give you victory. You must read Numbers so that you avoid the faithless failures of your ancestors. You must prepare your faith for battle and trust the Lord God to give you victory over your physical and spiritual